So this is focusing in and around Smartrak's TrackSafe portfolio, which is our health and safety management portfolio. We've got a number of them within number of portfolios within Smartrak, including the TrackWise, TrackSafe, and IQ portfolios, and they all sit together to provide a holistic ecosystem. So protecting lone workers out in the field is a really important thing that everyone's now starting to address more and more. And really importantly, the language we like to communicate is, whilst you might be out on your own, you're not alone. And we're trying to work in ways to ensure that teams can keep in contact with their staff members out in the field. Safety is increasingly becoming an important consideration for organisations whose staff work outside the office in the field. And legislation is becoming increasingly tight and clear on this. In Queensland, in Australia, we've seen new laws position company directors as liable should their staff not be amply protected. And the new workplace health and safety laws in New Zealand, there are some clearly defined steps around control measures for protecting lone workers out in the field. And one thing that's really interesting to note when seeing that is that the legislation we see in Australia tends to flow over quite consistently into New Zealand. So just looking at what's happening in Australia is a really good measure of what will be happening in the short-term future for New Zealand. So, as said, we've got a number of portfolios. Some of you may be currently using us in around some of the products from our TrackWise portfolio, which is our fleet management. But as said, we also operate within the lone worker and remote worker safety space. So that's our TrackSafe portfolio, which is focused around. And because they all operate within the one ecosystem, they're all complementary of one another. So if you're currently operating in one space, it's very easy to turn on some functionality in another and integrate them all together. Now, lone workers and safety out in the field, one of the key issues and key concerns that drives a lot of this is communication. Across Australia and New Zealand, there's a large range of areas where communication can be difficult, be it because of distance, reception, and also environmental conditions. So to battle this, we use a mix of technologies. We have cellular connections across 3 and 4G bands. We've got Iridium satellites for remote transmissions. And then we also work around portable satellite devices for use for lone workers away from vehicles, and also RF transmission or radio frequency transmission of devices to the vehicles and the units within vehicles for teams and individuals operating in and around their vehicles. I'll go into those in a bit more detail, but what's really important to note here is that no matter where your staff are, there is a way that you can communicate with them or have some sort of notification from them if they are in trouble. And really it all just comes down to finding the correct use case for your needs. One of the things that we really like to focus on is that integration is key. When staff are out in the field, it's very hard to monitor them full time unless you've got a dedicated team to that. So what we have built is an ecosystem that allows you to build in some automation and some systems to be able to help manage. Simple things like automated alerts for people operating out in the field if they cross over a GEO-FENCE into a particular region that's known to be high risk. If a vehicle has been within a collision and they've got high impact and rollover within the vehicle, then that will send off an automatic alert as well. We integrate with a number of 24/7 security monitoring organisations so that if your organisation doesn't have the capacity or the incentive to be monitoring your staff right around the clock, you've got the ability to palm that responsibility or that monitoring off to a third party. Another thing that's very important is multiple alert mediums. So we're able to see you're able to receive notifications across SMS, email. In the system itself, we've got alert notifications. So you've got a variety of ways in which you can be notified about someone setting off a duress signal. So very importantly, lone workers in Australia and New Zealand each have their own individual definitions. One I like to use is lone workers are considered those that work by themselves and or work in community with only limited support arrangements, which therefore expose them to risk by being isolated from the usual backup support. This is the case whether they regularly work alone or are occasionally alone and do not have access to immediate support from managers or other colleagues. Now, I've listed a few examples of lone worker roles that may be out in the field. So local council staff members who are out in the field, whether it's parking inspectors, meter readers, stuff like that, right through to animal management officers that will be going around picking up strays, police officers obviously out in the field and dealing with unnecessary people at times or aggressive people at times, mental health staff who will often do home visits, and we even work from a customer side with victims of domestic violence, so that those that are out in homes can be protected. Now, a really important thing to be aware of is that the vehicles are now considered a place of work. That means that even staff that are just driving out to meetings are now considered lone workers in many respects, and the dangers and the identification and protection of those people has become even more important than ever. Not that anyone's unlikely to have already be looking at their safety, but it's very important to be aware that that is now considered a place of work. So when looking at tracking, I like to have a look at it from two different methodologies, both of them revolving around that remote worker safety. We've got the vehicle-centric tracking, which is tracking staff based around vehicle location. It means that it's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship with the exact location of the staff member out in the field, but it can be very efficient when you've got a group or a team in the field who may be working near a vehicle. And ideally in these cases, you'll have a fairly good idea of the radius that that team will be working from the vehicle. Ideally, in a vehicle-centric tracking methodology, you would have a match up with something like a track-safe duress pendant, which is one of our products that triggers via radio frequency back to the unit in the vehicle, which allows those staff members operating around the vehicle to still be able to trigger a duress without actually having to go back to the vehicle and hit an in-vehicle dash switch for an emergency. Another advantage of vehicle-centric tracking is that the AVLs that are in vehicles can be configured with high impact and rollover detection. And this allows the vehicle to detect when it's been in a collision, or the AVL to detect when it's been in the collision due to the G-forces and the impact, and that will send an automatic alert out to the system and through whatever alert protocols that you have to the relevant people. This can be a really valuable thing, especially for people that have staff driving large kilometres, because oftentimes if they've been in a crash, might be in a state to be able to call back to base to say that they've been in an accident. Finally, vehicle-centric tracking also has the advantage of being able to have both satellite and cellular connectivity in a unit. This means that as a driver, you can be driving in areas of poor cellular reception, and the unit will quickly swap over to satellite to continue tracking wherever they are. And this just means that as a administrator back in the office, you get better visibility of where those staff members are at all times, rather than needing to wait till they get back into cellular reception again to be able to identify where they are up to the minute. Individual-centric tracking, on the other hand, has a very close one-to-one relationship. Ideally, staff members will be wearing or carrying their personal safety devices at all times, and via that, you'll be able to know exactly where that staff member is and from that also, who's going to be triggering that duress. Individual tracking is really beneficial, as staff members ideally should always have them on hand and on their person at all times. And unlike mobile phones, they're a really discreet device to be able to set off a manual duress if for whatever reason they are confronted by an issue out in the field. And we've seen this a number of times with customers where they've been confronted by third-party individuals and it wouldn't be appropriate to pull out a mobile phone to call for help because it would escalate the situation, whereas they're able to very simply hit a button on a device that may be mounted on their belt, and that signal then goes out to your administrators who are managing things. In and around our one-to-one personal safety, we've got a huge amount of devices out in the market now that provide a range of solutions. They have a range based off functions, where they're going to be used, and what exactly you need from them. Simple things like whether or not they operate over a satellite or a cellular network, the types of alerts they're able to send off, whether it's just being able to manually press a button to trigger an alert, or if you need more advanced functionality such as fall over or man down detection. So if a person has fallen over or injured themselves, knocked themselves unconscious, it will automatically be able to detect that up, and after a period of time will send off an alert. And we even have functionality such as inactivity detection. So if an individual hasn't moved for a period of time, it will send off an alert just to be able to check on them. This is our TrackSafe matrix, and what it does is it outlines all the functionality and features of our products in our TrackSafe portfolio. All these personal safety devices can be pretty simply categorized into a number of areas. The first lot on the top there is communicates on the mobile network, and these are the devices that will work wherever your mobile phone would work and communicate back via the mobile network. The next three are those that operate over the Iridium satellite network. And these have a number of advantages when working out in the field, because especially in areas of poor cellular reception, they're able to still communicate back to the system. And finally, we've got our radio frequency to in-vehicle AVL communication. These are a complementary device to the AVL in that they provide additional functionality and communication to a device that's likely already in your vehicles. The radio frequency allows those handheld devices to be able to set off alerts back to the vehicle, and the vehicle will then send those alerts back to the system. This is a slide that I'd recommend everyone comes back and has a look at after we finish the presentation. Some of the key functions that you might want to have a look at within here include the types of alerts which are listed under emergency that might be applicable to your team. The device information specifically around power requirements is an important one, with USB power now being a really common port within vehicles. It makes it nice and easy to charge devices up on the go. And also waterproof and dustproof if you're operating in environments where it's likely that they could be wet or get very dusty. So looking at what our customers often have as far as common requirements, there's a few things here that I'd recommend everyone assesses when they're looking at what they need within their lone worker solution. Knowing where your people are without having to check in with them at all times is a really handy thing to have. So whether it's vehicle-based or it's a one-to-one relationship, at least knowing where they are in the field is a really valuable thing for your team. And it means that you don't need to go through complicated systems of calling back to base on a regular period of time to check in and tell people where you are and where you're going. Getting the right response to the right location, and again, this is really important in if there is an emergency or an alert, that protocol is completed. So by having a device that's triggering an alert, it's going to your system. You can then set up protocols within the system for who gets alerted to ensure that they aren't in a state of emergency calling their manager who mightn't have the correct procedure on hand of how to handle it. Portable as well as in-vehicle alarms is becoming increasingly popular. So some people are taking the in-vehicle tracking and the personal one-to-one safety and combining them into a solution so that all lone workers have a personal safety device for when they're operating outside of a vehicle, but all vehicles are also tracked to provide a full 360 tracking and security system. Coverage, again, covering whether or not you need satellite reception or whether cellular reception is going to cover the areas of use that you're going to be having staff operate in. It's also important to identify areas where no reception or coverage is going to be available either by cellular or by satellite. And examples of that include people who might be working or going into basements or into freezers on a regular basis where they act as a Faraday cage and you don't have any communications going in and out. In situations like that, something like a TrackSafe Protector Pro with its time check-in is a really valuable feature in that it allows you to set a timer, and if you don't return and deactivate that timer within an hour or within whatever period of time you set, then it will automatically send an alert, and that alert will already be set up on the server side so that even if that device doesn't come back into reception, the server knows to set off an alert. So a proactive approach to safety at work is really important. Compliance is now becoming more and more important for organisations to identify the needs of what they need, of what they need to apply. Being proactive in being able to protect staff is a really important factor within this. Ensuring that you know where your staff are, you know the dangers that they may be approaching, and that you've got a system in place to be able to protect and be able to react if someone does have a duress situation. And via all that, you're able to meet your duty of care, ensuring that your staff are safe, that you've done everything that is in your power that is reasonable to ensure their safety. And especially in areas where people are operating alone, the duty of care is now pushing towards ensuring that staff either have a personal safety device on them or have an administrative system in place so that they need to be checking in on a regular basis. In New Zealand especially, and I think we've mostly got New Zealand customers online at the moment, the general risk and workplace management regulations are really important. Within that, they've got some minimisation control hierarchy, which includes the substitution, isolation and engineering controls, which are around substituting hazards, isolating the hazards, and imposing physical controls to reduce those hazards. Now, for lone workers in the field, that doesn't actually provide any assistance because a lot of the hazards or the dangers that they're facing are people in a lone worker environment with environmental risks as well as third party. So from there, we then step up into administrative controls where you're implementing processes and procedures to minimise those risks. And that's really a good start for many organisations, but it does have that human element to it. And that's where moving up to a personal protective equipment via a personal safety device is a really important next step in ensuring that you've got the systems and the tools in place so that those administrators' controls can be further complemented. Identifying, mitigating and managing risks is also an important matter, especially environmental risks can be very easily identified and managed. We've had examples of customers in Australia who have a bushfire feed set up within the IQ system, and they set up geofences around those areas that are at risk of fire or currently have active fires in them to notify them if staff cross into those areas. And from that, they're able to direct staff outside and into safety. Another example is a customer operating in remote Australia who in a large portion of their operating region doesn't have cellular reception. They have geofences set up so that when people are about to leave cellular reception, the administrators are notified and they can check in with those staff members to ensure everything's fine and also to just get a double check of what their plan is for the day. As with many of our customers, they identify that when their staff feel safe, they perform better and they also enjoy their job more. And so better worker satisfaction is a really nice side benefit of implementing a very dynamic lone worker policy and can lead towards you becoming an employer of choice. As stated, security monitoring is an integration that we have with a number of third parties. Within these, they have manned 24/7 call centres in secure environments designed and filled with staff trained to respond to any incoming alerts. There's very clearly set out escalation procedures for any alerts that do get received by them, and they are very good at following those escalation procedures and ensuring that the correct people are notified and that your staff are getting onto someone 100% of the time. It doesn't help if, for example, someone is working back late in the office or is working out in the field overnight and their supervisor is in bed. Now, they may be still being checked in with, but if that supervisor, for whatever reason, misses a call or misses a check-in, what's to say that they get that notification in time to be able to protect the staff member? And that's where a 24/7 control centre really does help manage that communication and ensure that there is always someone there to listen. Real-time alerts. So I highlighted this a little with the high impact and rollover functionality. But within this, we have real-time alerts for people crossing geofences, for triggering alerts, and also for, as mentioned, high impact and rollover. Within the system, once someone has triggered an alert, units will start triggering duress mode, and this allows them to provide rapid position updates on a regular basis, which just helps you more quickly identify where they are on a up-to-the-minute basis. And additionally, SMS and email notifications can be sent to individual staff members and managers and supervisors to ensure that they're notified of any issues as well. As mentioned, GEO-FENCE safety alerts can be really useful out in the field for a number of reasons. It really just comes up to your imagination and how you want to use them. From simple things such as cordoning off areas of danger, such as flooded roads or bushfires, through to areas that are permanently restricted because of known dangers, right through to areas that are known to not have phone reception, so that you can monitor those more closely who are moving into those areas, and also any other known risks or issues out in particular areas. As I said, it really does come up to your imagination as to how you see that being useful within your organisation. We've seen a wide number of applications in different ways people have applied that. So with that, I put it out to the phones for anyone who's got any questions around what we've covered off today. None there?
No questions from me.
No worries.
Hey, Matt, Gavin here. No questions from me either.
Fantastic. Alrighty. Well, in closing, guys, really important to ensure that no matter where your staff are, you've got coverage and communication with those staff members. So that's really looking at satellite and cellular communication, but also identifying areas of operation where no coverage will be available, whether it's satellite or cellular, so that you can help plan around those situations with devices like the TrackSafe Protector Pro and the Time Check in. Prioritising management and monitoring of staff in the field. So there's often dozens of staff out in the field, and it's difficult to know who you should be looking at closely to check their safety. So again, using things like GEO-FENCEs or regions that you know are going to be high risk to ensure that you can prioritise the monitoring of those operating in those areas is very important. We've gone through the definition and requirements for lone workers in a very broad sense. I'd highly suggest, if you guys haven't already, having a close look at the legislation in and around that and the step stages as far as the requirements for protecting those lone workers. We've also gone over some common requirements that we see across our customer base and some general methodologies to consider when tracking your staff. And that's really focusing on whether or not you really want to be honing in on a one-to-one relationship of tracking, or if you really want to do it more off a vehicle-centric basis with a radius around that vehicle in which you'd expect staff to be operating. So I'll finish it up here, guys. Thank you very much for all your time, and we will send out an email with a link to the recording as well as all the slides for you guys to have a review of after this.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks.
Take care, all.
Bye.